Hi everyone, my name is Emily and I am the director of the SBH Center for Culinary Medicine and Teaching Kitchen, and I am bringing the Teaching Kitchen to you. And today I'm going to show you how to make some healthy banana bread. Banana bread's great because if you do any kind of baking at home, you probably already have the ingredients that you need to make this. You just have to add bananas. So for this banana bread, I'm going to bake it in a loaf pan. You could also use a muffin tin or a mini muffin tin if you want to turn this into muffins. You don't have to do anything different to do that. And I'm going to go ahead and grease this. So I like to use butter when I'm greasing my loaf pan. We're not adding so much butter that I'm too worried about a lot of extra fat being added. I just find that it works a lot better than using oil. If you don't want to use butter, you can definitely use oil. You're just going to pour some into your pan, use a paper towel to kind of spread it around. And so for me, using butter, my trick that I like to use is keeping the wrapper on the butter and just folding it down so I can pinch the butter without actually getting my hands greasy. And you're just going to rub that butter on the sides of the pan, making sure to get into the corners. And this is just going to keep that bread from sticking. If you have a non-stick pan, a non-stick baking pan, I would still do this just in case, just because you don't want your bread to stick to your pan when you try to turn it out. So that's it. My pan is greased, my fingers are not greasy, and I can go ahead and put this off to the side. And now we're going to go ahead and mix together our ingredients. So banana bread is considered a quick bread, which means that we're not using yeast to make it rise, we're using baking soda instead. So for quick breads, we always want to make sure that we keep our dry ingredients separate from our wet ingredients. That baking soda is activated as soon as it hits liquid. So if we mix it together with the liquids too quickly and don't get it into the oven fast enough, we're not going to get a nice rise on our bread. So I'm going to start by mixing together my dry ingredients. Today I'm using a mixture of oat flour and whole wheat flour. Oat flour is really easy to make. I never buy it, I always just make it myself. You just use regular oats, put them in the blender, blend on high speed until you have a nice flour. So I have 3/4 cup of oat flour, and then I have 1 cup of whole wheat flour. This is regular whole wheat flour. If you have white whole wheat flour, that works really well. If you don't have whole wheat flour, you can also use all-purpose flour, or you could use 100% oat flour. So that's my 1 cup of whole wheat flour. And then I'm going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Salt is really important in baking. I know it seems weird to add salt to something that's sweet, but that salt really helps with flavor development in our baking. If we don't add that salt, sometimes things can taste too cloyingly sweet and we're not going to get any of the other flavors. So we need that salt in there. Then we're going to add 1 teaspoon of baking soda. And I'm going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. So I'm just going to whisk that all together, make sure everything is evenly incorporated. And now we can do our wet ingredients. So for our wet ingredients, we are going to start with 1/3 cup of oil. This is olive oil. You can use any kind of oil you have. If you don't have oil, it's okay to use a little bit of butter. It's not so much that we're going to be too concerned about that. So 1/3 cup of oil, and then I'm going to add 1/3 cup of sugar. I'm just using regular white sugar. I prefer to use brown sugar here because I like the flavor of it. If I don't have any, it's okay. You could also use honey or maple syrup, whatever you like, but today I'm just using regular white sugar. And you're gonna go ahead and whisk that all together. And then to this, we are going to add 2 large eggs. So we've gone ahead and added 2 large eggs to this, and I'm gonna go ahead and whisk that all together. I like to add my eggs early on because I find it easier to whisk them together when there's not that much liquid in there. So make sure those eggs are nice and mixed together. And then we can go ahead and add 1/4 cup of milk. If you don't have milk, you could also use something like yogurt or even water if that's all you have, or almond milk, some kind of liquid. we'll whisk that together. And then to this banana bread, we're going to add some applesauce. So this might seem like a weird ingredient to add. Applesauce is really great in baking and acts as a fat replacer, so we don't have to add as much butter or oil as you would see in a normal banana bread recipe. It also adds sweetness, so we don't have to add as much sugar either. 1/3 of a cup of sugar for this whole loaf of banana bread really isn't that much. A lot of other recipes you see might call for a full cup of sugar. So that applesauce and those bananas that we're adding, they add sweetness, so we don't have to add as much added sugar. So we'll add that applesauce. I'm also going to go ahead and add about 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. I never measure my vanilla, I always eyeball it. If you add more or less than 1/2 teaspoon, it's okay. It's just a little extra added flavor. So we'll whisk that together, and then the last thing that we need for our banana bread is, of course, bananas. So you want 1 full cup of mashed bananas, which I've already gone ahead and mashed. I always like to keep frozen bananas on hand, so when I buy a bunch of bananas, I never eat them all before they start to go bad. So as soon as you see your bananas starting to turn brown, you can peel them and then put them in a Tupperware or a Ziploc bag, stick them in the freezer, and then you always have bananas on hand to make some banana bread. So we're gonna go ahead, whisk that in. It's okay if it's a little bit lumpy from the bananas. And now I'm going to put the whisk away in order to add my dry ingredients to my wet. So we want our banana bread to be really nice and tender, and the way to do that is to make sure that we don't overmix our banana bread. So I'm going to add the dry to the wet, and then I'm going to switch to a rubber spatula, and you're only going to mix enough to make sure that you don't see any flour in your batter, any dry flour in your batter. We don't want to overmix this because we do have wheat flour in here. Wheat flour, when it hits water and you start mixing it up, forms gluten. The more gluten we have, the tougher our bread is going to be. So we want to be really gentle with this. We don't want to stir it too much because we don't want to form that gluten and have that be really tough. Gluten is something we want when we make bread. We want that to be really strong. This we want to be very, very tender. Alright, so everything is incorporated. I'm not going to mix anymore. All I'm going to do is pour my batter into my loaf pan. And again, you can use a muffin tin if you want and turn this into muffins. You're just going to bake it for about 20 minutes instead. We are going to bake this at 325 degrees for about 50 minutes to an hour. And then we'll check in by inserting a toothpick into the center to see if it's done. And I'll show you how to do that when we check in. And you can stick this in just as it is. If you want to do some toppings, you can. Some people like to sprinkle oats on top. I have some sliced almonds that I had left over, so I'm just going to sprinkle those on top. Just to have a nice topping. And we will put this in the oven and check in about 50 minutes. Alright, so our bread has been in the oven for about 50 minutes and we're going to go ahead and test it. A lot of recipes will tell you that a toothpick should come out clean, so I'll show you what that means. I don't have a toothpick on hand, so my way of testing bread is just taking a thin knife. This is a paring knife that I like to use. And you're just going to stick it into the center of the bread and then pull it out. And so by coming out clean, that means that we don't want any wet looking batter to come out on our toothpick, on our knife. You could use a chopstick if you want to. This should have no batter on it at all. So we have a little bit of batter, not a ton. This probably needs about another 5 minutes in the oven, and then we'll check it again and hopefully it'll be done. Alright, so we just pulled our bread out. I let it bake for an additional 10 minutes, which means that our total bake time has been about 1 hour. And again, I'm just going to check it to make sure it's done. So I'm going to take my knife straight into the middle of the bread, and I can see that it's coming back pretty clean. There's a few crumbs on there, but that's okay. The most important part is there's no wet batter anywhere on my knife, which means that the bread on the inside is entirely cooked through. So All we have to do now is allow this to cool completely. Once it's cool, it's going to be a lot easier to take out of the container. And then you're just going to want to store it either wrapped in plastic wrap or in some kind of plastic Tupperware type container, and then eat it within about 3 to 5 days. This bread is so delicious though, I'm sure it's going to be gone way before it would ever go bad. And there you have it, some very simple, easy, healthy banana bread that's going to be super, super delicious. And once again, my name is Emily. If you have any questions about this banana bread or any cooking in general, feel free to reach out to me, leave me some comments below. I love hearing from you all, and I'll see you again next time.